So we talked about three strategies day before yesterday and yesterday. Strategy one was choose a difficult task, but not too difficult so that there is flow. Strategy two was about having a clear and concrete objective so that it's a clear objective, then, there's a flow. And strategy three was concentrating on a single task as compared to multitasking. So now flow in Japan. Takumi's engineers, geniuses, and otakus. What do Takumi's artisans in Japanese, engineers, inventors, and otakus, fans of anime and manga in Japanese have in common? They all understand the importance of flowing with their ikigai at all times. One widespread stereotype about people in Japan is that they are exceptionally dedicated and hardworking. Even though some Japanese people say they look like they are working harder than they really are, there is no doubt, though, about their ability to completely be absorbed in a task, or about their perseverance when there is a problem to be solved. One of the first words one learns when starting Japanese lessons in Ganbaru, which means to persevere or to stay firm by doing one's best. Japanese people often apply themselves to even the most basic tasks with an intensity that borders on obsession. We see this in all kinds of contexts, from the retirees taking meticulous care of their rice fields in the mountains of Nagano, to the college students working the weekend shifts in convenience stores known as konbins. If you go to Japan, you will experience this attention to detail firsthand in almost every transaction. Walk into one of the stores that sell handcrafted objects in Naha, Kanazawa, or Kyoto, and you'll also discover that Japan is a treasure trove of traditional craftwork. The people of Japan have a quite unique talent for creating new technologies while preserving artisanal traditions and techniques. It's interesting. I've never been to Japan, but I have heard a lot about, people with their experiences in Japan. One of my friend was in Japan for good 2 years. And I remember, he narrated that incident to me. He was working in a departmental store, and one of the shelves in that departmental store got stocked out. So that means there was no material in that shelf. So instead, like a usual Indian store would do, acha ji, nahi, wo to aa raha hai ji, wo to kar rahe hain ji, they actually shut that store for half an hour, called for a Gemba meeting, that is the meeting on the shop floor, and started discussing to find a solution that why this should not be there again. I mean, if you think about it, after Japan was one of the only countries, being destroyed badly after World War II, especially the attacks by US on the Hiroshima and Nagasaki with their nuclear bombs. The entire two cities and, all the vicinity surrounding was completely destroyed. But in spite of that, they came back, and they are right now one of the most pioneering countries in terms of technology, in terms of know-how. I mean, in terms of manufacturing, I would say these companies like Toyota, Mitsubishi, especially the auto car companies, and the Toyota way of Kaizen and Gemba Kaizen. I mean, they actually have such strong systems that for the error to happen, it's very, very bleak. The art of the Takumi. Toyota employs artisans who are able to make a certain type of screw by hand. These Takumi, or experts in a particular manual skill, are extremely important to Toyota, and they are hard to replace. Some of them are the only people who know how to perform their exact skill. And it doesn't seem as though a new generation is going to take up the mantle. Turntable needles are another example. They are produced almost exclusively in Japan, where you can find the last remaining people who know how to use the machinery required to make these precision needles and who are trying to pass on their knowledge to their descendants. We met a Takumi on a visit to Kumano, a small town near Hiroshima. We were there for the day working on a photo essay for one of the most famous brands of makeup brushes in the West. The billboard welcoming visitors to Kumano shows a mascot holding a large brush. In addition to the brush factories, the town is full of little houses and vegetable gardens. Heading farther in, you can see several Shinto shrines at the base of the mountains that surround the town. We spent hours taking photos in factories full of people in orderly rows, each doing a single task, such as painting the handles of the brushes or loading boxes of them onto trucks. Before we realized, we still hadn't seen anyone actually putting bristles into the brush heads. After we asked about this and got the runaround several times, the president of one company agreed to show us how it was done. He led us out of the building and asked us to get in a car. After a 5-minute drive, we parked next to another small structure and climbed the stairs. He opened the door and we walked into a small room filled with windows that let in lovely natural light. In the middle of the room was a woman wearing a mask. You could see only her eyes. She was so focused on choosing individual bristles for the brushes, gracefully moving her hands and fingers, using scissors and combs to sort the bristles, that she didn't even notice our presence. Her movements were so quick, it was hard to tell what she was doing. The president of the company interrupted her to let her know that we'd be taking photos as she worked. We couldn't see her mouth, but the glint in her eye and the cheerful inflection in her speech let us know she was smiling. She looked happy and proud, talking about her work and responsibilities. We had to use extremely fast shutter speeds to capture her movements. Her hands danced and flowed in concert with her tools and the bristles she was sorting. The president told us that this Takumi was one of the most important people in the company. Even though she was hidden away in a separate building, every bristle of every brush the company made passed through her hands. So, these kinds of Takumis or artisans are there everywhere. And, their skill set is so peculiar and so precise. I mean, even if you talk about India, you will, all these Kashmiri shawl guys, those Rajasthani handicraft people, they have these particular skills that are only there with them. But now the whole issue is that, yes, I've heard about a lot of these exclusive artisans are resorting to the use of technology in order to teach because uh, at this stage, if you look at that, if you want to teach in person, the chances are that you might teach 10 people, 15 people, 20 people. But yeah, if you can use the technology to your favor, you can actually end up teaching a lot of people. And yes, recording all the nitty-gritties of these things. But yeah, so the concept here is that, when these artisans are working, they're so in that flow that they will not notice anything. And, their hand movements are so fast and so precise. It's like a robot working if you minus the face. That's how the hand movements work. I mean, they're so skilled to perfection. And I don't know, India also has a lot of skilled people, but yeah, Japan, China, these people are so concentrated on their work. So even if you visit their manufacturing plants, a lot of times they will not notice you because they're so busy in their entire thing, what they're doing, that you go unnoticed. Steve Jobs in Japan. Apple co-founder Steve Jobs was a big fan of Japan. Not only did he visit the Sony factories in the 1980s and adopt many of their methods when he founded Apple, he also captivated the simplicity and quality of Japanese porcelain in Kyoto. It was not, however, an artisan from Kyoto who won Steve Jobs' devotion, but rather a Takumi from Toyomo named Yukio Shakunaga, who used a technique called Echu Setoyaki, known by only a few. On a visit to Kyoto, Jobs heard of an exhibition of Shakunaga's work. He immediately understood that there was something special about Shakunaga's porcelain. As a matter of fact, he bought several cups, vases, and plates and went back to show 3 times that week. Jobs returned to Kyoto several times over the course of his life in search of inspiration and ended up meeting Shakunaga in person. It is said that Jobs had many questions for him, almost all of them about the fabrication process and the type of porcelain he used. Shakunaga explained that he used white porcelain that he extracted himself from the mountains in the Toyama prefecture, making him the only artist in his ilk familiar with fabrication process of porcelain objects from their origins in the mountains to their final form, an authentic Takumi. Jobs was so impressed that he considered going to Toyama to see the mountain where Shakunaga got his porcelain, but thought better of it when he heard that it was more than 4 hours by train from Kyoto. In an interview after Jobs' death, Shakunaga said that he was very proud that his work had been appreciated by the man who created the iPhone. He added that Jobs' last purchase from him had been a set of 12 teacups. Jobs had asked for something special, a new style. To satisfy his request, Shakunaga made 150 teacups in the process of testing out new ideas. Of these, he chose the 12 best and sent them to the Jobs family. Ever since his first trip to Japan, Jobs was fascinated and inspired by country artisans, engineers, especially at Sony, philosophy, especially Zen, and cuisine, especially sushi. So everybody knows Steve Jobs. So he was a regular at the Asian countries, spending 2 years in the Himalayan mountains, taking so many visits to Japan, taking so many visits to Tibet monasteries. So he actually was quite linked and quite impressed with the Eastern, philosophy. And if you look at a lot of his day-to-day works, he was so much, I mean, not something to be quoted, but yeah, Steve Jobs was famous for walking around in his office barefooted. He hated to wear shoes, and his shoes actually used to stink. If you see the movie Jobs, you can see that. And in India, that's grounding. Walking barefooted without any shoes is called grounding. It's called earthing. So he actually took to the core of what was actually there in these Eastern philosophies. And he was so impressed with Sony. In fact, Sony did so many wonderful things for their employees. I mean, it's amazing. I was going through one of the audio course wherein it was stated that the founder of Sony was so fascinated with art and sound therapy that he got these sound therapists and art therapists in the premises of Sony Corporation headquartered, and he made sure all the pregnant women working with Sony to go for a special sound therapy and art therapy. And in that therapy, now if the child is in the mother's womb, he can hear after a certain period of time, so 4 months, 4.5 months. After that, he can hear. So they actually took 172 participants in the Sony headquarters, and out of the entire 172 pregnant females, they made them do a lot of sound therapy, a lot of art therapy, and they actually, encourage the mothers, the to-be mothers, to speak with the baby in the womb. And this was done way back. I'm talking 90s. And as a result of that, in 2012, the stats was conducted. Out of 182 or 172, the original first sample, more than 90% of the boys or girl, whoever were born, more than 90% were actually excelling in all endeavors in life. So, using that to speak with the child in the womb, the pioneer was the founder of Sony. And he used to call international healers like Deepak Chopra and all others to visit him and explain it to these, his top-notch employees, and get them into all these Zen philosophies and meditation philosophies. So Japan, yes, Sony has been a name associated with a lot of advancement with Japan. So, and the founder of Sony has done a lot of work for their upliftment of their employees. So this is just one of the example. I mean, he had a entire wing for training their employees. Sophisticated simplicity. What do Japanese artisans, engineers, Zen philosophy, and cuisine have in common? Simplicity and attention to detail. It is not a lazy simplicity, but a sophisticated one that searches out new frontiers, always taking the object, the body, and mind, or the cuisine to the next level according to one's ikigai. As Csikszentmihalyi would say, the key is always having a meaningful challenge to overcome in order to maintain flow. The documentary Jiro Dreams of Sushi gives us another example of a Takumi, this time in the kitchen. Its protagonist has been making sushi every day for more than 80 years and owns a small sushi restaurant near the Ginza subway station in Tokyo. He and his son go every day to the famous Tazuchi fish market and choose the best fish to bring back to the restaurant. In the documentary, we see one of Zero's apprentice learning to make tamago, a thin, slightly sweet omelette. No matter how hard he tries, he can't get Zero's approval. He keeps practicing for years until he finally does. Why does the apprentice refuse to give up? Does he get bored cooking eggs every day? No, because making sushi is his ikigai too. Both Zero and his son are culinary artists. They don't get bored when they cook, they achieve a state of flow. They enjoy themselves completely when they are in the kitchen. That is their happiness, their ikigai. They've learned to take pleasure in their work, to lose their sense of time. Beyond the close relationship between father and sons, which helps them keep the challenge going each day, they also work in a quiet, peaceful environment that allows them to concentrate. Even after receiving a 3-star rating from Michelin, they never considered opening other locations or expanding the business. They serve just 10 patrons at a time at the bar of their small restaurant. Zero's family isn't looking to make money. Instead, they value good working conditions and creating an environment in which they can flow while making the best sushi in the world. Zero, like Yukio Shakunaga, begins his work at the source. He goes to the fish market to find the best tuna. Shakunaga goes to the mountains to find the best porcelain. When they get down to work, both become one with the object they are creating. This unity with the object that they reach in a state of flow takes on special meaning in Japan, where, according to Shintoism, forests, trees, and objects have a kami, spirit or god, within them. When someone, whether an artist, an engineer, or a chef, sets out to create something, his or her responsibility is to use nature to give it life while respecting that nature at every moment. During this process, the artisan becomes one with the object and flows with it. An iron worker would say that metal has a life of its own, just as someone making ceramics would say that the clay does. The Japanese are skilled at bringing nature and technology together, not man versus nature, but rather a union of the two. It's beautifully mentioned that how these people, running not fancy businesses, not MNCs, small businesses, but still, enjoying their work to the fullest. For them, money is secondary, rather than unlikely a lot of people who are currently just working for money. For them, money was a byproduct. If it came, it came. It didn't come, it didn't come. But they enjoyed their flow. They enjoyed their ikigai. It happens when there is something that you're so engrossed in, and it's probably something which has to do a lot with your profession as well, then the satisfaction and the happiness from doing that, that's the only reward you think about. I don't say per se money is not important. Money is equally important. You need money for everything you want, your basic food, shelter, basic living, and everything. But when you are in that flow, and you can actually notice a lot of people who are so engrossed in their work that actually the money will be flowing, but they don't know whether it's flowing or not flowing. And they're not bothered. They are just enjoying their lives, doing what they love to do, doing what they're actually good at, and just being in that flow, engrossed, totally, truly, deeply, madly. Nothing else matters to them. बस यही है, I am born to do this, मैंने यही करना. From now, imagine a restaurant owner going and buying all his vegetables, or a chef going and buying all his vegetables, and then coming to the kitchen, chopping them, and then cutting them. It's a rare phenomenon. It's a rare phenomenon because commercialization is at peak right now. It's all about volumes. It's all about numbers. So where is the artist? Has lost his beauty. But aaj bhi, there are a lot of people who are so particular about a lot of things. So they might not be running a lot of fancy restaurants, but yeah, they might be running one or two restaurants or one or two things they are doing, but they're so particular and so peculiar that even the raw materials are being sourced by them. And if not sourced, at least inspected fully and then only selected by them. The purity of Ghibli. There are those who say that the Shinto value of being connected with nature is vanishing. One of the harshest cities of this loss is another artist with a clearly defined ikigai. Hayao Miyazaki, the director of the animated films produced by Studio Ghibli. In nearly all his films, we see humans, technology, fantasy, and nature is a state of conflict. And in the end, coming together, one of the most poignant metaphors in his filmed Spirited Away is an obese spirit covered in trash that represents the pollution of the rivers. In Miyazaki's films, forests have personalities, trees have feelings, and robots befriend birds. Considered a national treasure by the Japanese government, Miyazaki is an artist capable of becoming absorbed in his art. He uses a cell phone from the late 1990s and he makes his entire team draw by hand. He directs his films by rendering a paper even the tiniest details, achieving flow by drawing, not by using a computer. Thanks to this obsession on the director's part, Studio Ghibli is one of the only studios in the world where almost the entire production process is carried out using traditional techniques. Those who have visited Studio Ghibli know that it is fairly typical on a given Sunday to see a solitary individual tucked away in a corner, hard at work, a man in simple clothes who will greet them with an Ohio hello without looking up. Miyazaki is so passionate about his work that he spends many Sundays in the studio enjoying the state of flow, putting his ikigai above else. Visitors know that under no circumstances is one to bother Miyazaki, who is known for his quick temper, especially if he is interrupted while drawing. In 2013, Miyazaki announced that he was going to retire. To commemorate his retirement, the television station NHK made a documentary showing him in his last days at work. He is drawing in nearly every scene of the film. In one scene, Several of his colleagues are seen coming out of a meeting, and there he is drawing in a corner, paying no attention to them. Another scene, he's shown walking to work on December 30th, a national holiday in Japan, and opening the doors of Studio Ghibli, and so he can spend the day there drawing alone. Miyazaki can't stop drawing. The day after his retirement, instead of going on vacation or staying at home, he went to Studio Ghibli and sat down to draw. His colleagues put on their best poker faces, not knowing what to say. 1 year later, he announced he wouldn't make any more feature films, but that he would keep on drawing until the day he died. Can someone really retire if he is passionate about what he does? So, it's just one of the examples of so many different people, who are so passionate and so into their work that a Sunday, a public holiday does not bother them. For them, what matters is the satisfaction they get from working in whatever field they are and in whatever circumstances. Being in that flow, being in that continuous way of whatever you are doing, be it cooking, be it painting, be it drawing, be it working, they derive so much of passion out of it that for them, that is life. Anything beyond it, they don't even think about. So they're so engrossed and